Emily, what's on your radar?
Well, we're talking a lot about stimulus-induced inflation and student loan debt, but very little about the human faces of this economy. The mom who still can't find baby formula, the family forced to resort to food banks, the man who went into the military to pay for college instead of borrowing, the woman putting off marriage until she can pay off her student loan debt. A wildly under-discussed problem in the American economy and culture is, as Nicholas Eberstadt puts it, men without work. Eberstadt released a book with that title back in 2016 and is releasing next week an updated version that crunches some of the numbers post-pandemic. Quote, "We've got this situation now," he told the Wall Street Journal this week, "where we've had roughly speaking 11 million unfilled jobs since last Labor Day, since last September 2021, and employers are screaming for workers. They're begging for workers, and there are millions and millions and millions of men and women who are sitting on the sidelines, not coming back into the economy at a time when workers have more bargaining power than in living memory." Zeroing in on men, Eberstadt explained, for every prime age guy who's unemployed, there are over 4 who are neither working nor looking for work. We have this unworking army of over 7 million prime age men in the United States today. Now, about 9/10 of that group, according to Eberstadt, have, quote, basically dropped out of the labor economy. What's worse, BLS statistics that Eberstadt reviewed found, quote, these labor force dropouts basically don't do civil society. They don't do worship, they don't do charity, they don't do volunteering work, they don't do much help around the house with other people or housework, they don't get out of the house that much, they say. What they say they do is watch screens, he said, adding, and other information says about half of these guys report using some sort of pain medication every day, about half. Eberstadt, an economist at the American Enterprise Institute, believes formerly incarcerated men are a big part of the story, and unfortunately, he argues, there's something of a statistical blind spot, meaning we don't know enough about what happens to people after they're released from prison. This could be fodder for a great debate on Marx or Ayn Rand or even universal basic income, but much more importantly, it means right now, millions of men are getting by on very little, in so much pain, physical or mental, they're relying on drugs to make life bearable. This, even though, as Eberstadt points out, there are plenty of unfilled jobs. It's sort of men without work in 2016, now in 2022, work without men, as Eberstadt said. If we can bring the student loan conversation in for just a moment, bear in mind 2 numbers. First, average student loan debt is around $40,000. And second, according to Pew, as of December 2021, 41% of college graduates ages 22 to 27 were underemployed. That means their jobs don't require their degrees. So Big Ed, as a special interest group, is vigorously pushing a product with a terrible ROI, pouring money into the political system to preserve their grift and avoid reforms, all while politicians let them get away with it, and families desperately hoping to secure the American dream for themselves and their children borrow more and more. The whole system is unfair, let alone Biden's executive order. Marriage rates in the middle class are declining. Women are having fewer children than they say they want. Suicide attempts by young girls jumped 50% during the pandemic. The neoliberal political establishment, and especially the right, had a horrible, dehumanizing habit for years of talking about people and workers like cogs in a machine. None of this is to say America's millions of sidelined men are failures because they aren't contributing to the economy. That's how some folks on the right or even the left might see it. Remember when Hillary Clinton bragged that the places where people voted for her had higher GDPs? Remember that? What Eberstadt highlights is not merely a dropping out of the workforce. He shows that BLS studies find the significant chunk of the adult male population is dropping out of civil society, period. Questions of productivity be damned, this economy and this culture is eroding our dignity. A 2017 Pew survey found roughly 7 in 10 adults say it is very important for a man to be able to support a family financially to be a good husband or partner. That included 7 in 10 men. People don't want to scrape by on stimulus checks, but it's a sad statement that screen time seems better than the alternative, whether it's getting a job or going to church or working on a volunteer basis in the community, playing rec sports, whatever it is. Meanwhile, one of the most powerful men in the world told Joe Rogan yesterday that, quote, in the future where you can use AR, VR, and teleport in the morning to the office and show up as a hologram, I think that's going to be pretty sweet, right? It will unlock a lot of economic opportunity for a lot of people. Imagine if you didn't have to move to some city that didn't have your values in order to be able to get all the economic opportunities. That would be awesome, Mark Zuckerberg said. Now, I'm extremely hostile to social media, as a lot of you probably know, but still remain open to the idea that the metaverse might have some reasonably scaled role in our future, whether we like it or not. But people meet their spouses at work. They meet their closest friends at work in some cases. They learn how to be a member of a community at work. If we take away that aspect, there's no civil society right now to fall back on in much of the country. There aren't bowling leagues anymore or active church communities. Foisting new tech on the country without a plan to bring any of that back is disgraceful. There's been a strong principle that when you destroy wetlands to build, you're disturbing the ecosystem and should offset that by replacing the wetlands that were destroyed. Companies operate on environmental principles like this, sincerely or otherwise, but we have no such expectation for companies plundering our social environment. We just let people retreat to the shadows, throw money at them every once in a while, and find new ways to numb ourselves as the social fabric tatters all around us. Right, in some ways this is a really easy critique to sort of sit back and make, to just say everything's broken, it's all a mess. But I do think in the context of two sort of seemingly disparate things, Mark Zuckerberg talking about how great the metaverse is going to be. You can just be a hologram in a big city, but live out in the country with your family, even though how are you going to form a family if you're always a hologram and your experiences were more synthetic than in person? And the student loan crisis, which has shown just an abject failure of our government to perform a very, very basic function for decades. When I think about those two things, it does seem entirely reasonable, in fact, to make this very easy critique and say, no, everything is completely broken, and with consequences that we don't often think about.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned the neoliberal establishment. The era of neoliberalism, starting in the 70s, so this is not just Republicans, but Reagan really supercharged it, broke two things and did them together. They broke communities and they broke unions. And so in order to break the unions, often they would just up and move entire manufacturing plants and businesses, first down south into right-to-work states like South Carolina and elsewhere. I was born in Allentown, and as everything was packed up and shipped out of Allentown, first it went to South Carolina, other places in the South, and then once there became labor agitation there, then it went to Mexico, and then eventually China and elsewhere around the world. And what that then does is it breaks the community. Like there's just, and then what fills it are, like you said, despair, drugs, crime. And the only way I can see bringing that back is to restore community ecosystems, to restore unions. The kind of just organic drive toward unionization around the country. Just another Chipotle organized just yesterday, another REI. I think you're seeing it kind of all over the place. And this isn't kind of the AFL-CIO from on high, like finally figuring out how to send organizers. It's people just
definitely
organically coming together and forming unions. Those unions can give people camaraderie, can give people a sense of solidarity and purpose in what are otherwise just miserable jobs. And so if you can sell that to people, say, hey, look, if you decide to come back into the labor force, you're going to be here with your brothers and sisters working as comrades toward a common goal. Then you have a sense of purpose. And if you can then prevent a new neoliberal swing from smashing that again, because you're already seeing, Ken Klippenstein's done some great reporting on this, you're already seeing companies saying publicly, we need higher unemployment because workers have too much power right now. And we need to drive up the jobless rate so people are living in fear. And when they're living in fear, then they won't be able to organize unions, they won't be able to ask for days off, they won't be able to ask for better shifts, they won't be able to say, hey, how about if you're going to ask me to work on the weekend, you tell me before Friday?
Yeah, well, no, it's the exact same mentality, a different flavor of the same mentality. It was like, we're shutting down this Caterpillar factory, and we're taking it to Mexico. We're taking this factory to China, and I think there's a good argument that some of that happened because of the excesses of labor unions. That there was some of that, 100%, that drove jobs to different countries. And it's also like what Reagan was reacting to were excesses in the Great Society that people were saying, these are problems for communities too, and I would much rather have a private sector union bargaining for healthcare than throwing subsidies at people, taxpayer-funded subsidies at people to pay for a broken system without even fixing the system. Like, I would much rather have that. I think that is a great alternative. But yeah, it seems like the Great Resignation is resetting things to a degree, but the work without men problem, where you have jobs available, but because of these degree mismatches, for whatever reason, people aren't taking them, that is an incredible statement, I think, on despair. And when we look at numbers, when we look at the stock market being really high, and we say, oh, the economy's great, that's bullshit. That doesn't mean the economy's great at all.
Right, yeah, corporate America blew up the labor force, then they salted the earth, and now they're surprised that nothing is growing.
That is a perfect way to put it. They're not restoring the wetlands.
No, they're not. No, they're not. Anyway.
Looking forward to what's on your radar after this, Ryan.